Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending the Thai Knowledge Series webinar today on June 17th at 12 p.m. We have great lineup of speakers, and Ravi Konakonda will be moderating the event. And we'll be talking about the global trends in auto industry in the next decade. I hope you all will enjoy it. Uh, any questions, please put that in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to cater to all the questions and give you the answers. If we are not able to go through all the questions, certainly we will reach out to the panelists, get the answers, and then pass it on to you via email. With that, I would like to introduce my executive director and friend, Anil Ramanini, and he will quickly take you through the Thai SoCal, what Thai is all about, what are some of the upcoming events, and then he will pass it on to Ravi Konakonda, who is our moderator for the day. Thank you, and over to you, Anil.
Thank you, Anshuman. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar. By now, you might know that Thai was formed in 1992 in Silicon Valley. Currently, we're in 14 countries with 61 chapters, and Thai SoCal was the first chapter out of Silicon Valley, and it was started in 1997, right, and in Cerritos. And our upcoming events are on June 22nd, we have Angel Investing Demystified at 6:30 p.m. On 24th, we have Thai SoCal Angels Virtual Pitch at 12 p.m. And on June 25th, Thursday, at 6:30 p.m., we have a topic is use of AI and imaging in COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 world. Those are the events for June. And here is our speaker chair and moderator, Ravi. Go ahead, Ravi. Thank you.
Excellent. Hey, thank you very much, Anil. I truly appreciate it. Thank you to Thai for helping us organize this. A very exciting panel out here, global trends in the automotive industry over the next decade, perspectives from an entrepreneur's perspective and opportunities. We have 4 awesome speakers. I am really, really excited to welcome our 4 speakers. Alexander Edwards is President of Strategic Vision. Dr. Partha Goswami is Senior Manager, Technology Trends and Insights at General Motors. Raymond Zhang is Managing Director at Honda Innovations. And Charles Owens is a partner at EV2 Ventures. What we are going to do here is in the first couple of minutes, we are just setting up the state of Thai. What I will start doing 12:05 to 1:10, we will have 4 different perspectives. Each of them, we are going to have a conversation with each of them. They're going to give presentations. It's going to be a mix of presentations and conversations on a one-on-one basis with each of these gentlemen. And then what we are going to do is we're going to open it up to questions and answers, hopefully around the 105, 110, around the 105 to 110 timeline. Okay. I know that we are just having a little bit of an issue getting Alexander online. So Anshuman or Anil, can you just, if it's possible, can you resend him his registration link, please? I think he's having some problems. Okay.
Doing it right now.
Yeah. So I will, while we are just getting set up with him, I want to welcome all 4 of our panelists. Thank them for their time and insights. I have known all of them for quite some time, and it is a lot of fun to have you here. Just again, reinforcing Anshuman's logistics from a few minutes back. Please hold your questions or type your questions in the Q&A segment, only in the Q&A chat box, so that once our talks are done, we will open it up to questions and answers. Okay. So that said, I'm going to swap this. So Anshuman, is Alexander back on? Do you know? I'm going to stop sharing out here.
No, I'm working
He's
on it.
not.
So you can start
He's
with
not.
the other panelists. And
Yeah. So why don't I do that? So first of all, I want to introduce, so we'll just change the lineup a little bit. We'll start with Partha Goswami. We'll then go with Raymond, or we'll get Alexander. Hopefully by that time, Alexander will be back in. Is that good with you, Partha?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yes, I can. So let me do a brief introduction. Our first speaker is Dr. Partha Goswami. He is Senior Manager of Technology Planning and Strategy at General Motors. Dr. Partha Goswami is a 25-year veteran leader in the automotive industry with a deep background spanning product development, strategic planning, and a variety of business enterprises in brand and capital management. He has been working on various facets of technology strategy for the past 10 years. He has managed General Motors R&D's global advanced portfolio in connected vehicles, and was actively involved in research, roadmap development, and ideation for GM's first electric car, the Chevy Volt. What a beautiful car, by the way. You guys remember that? That's fantastic. That's a great car. So congratulations on that, Partha. As Senior Manager of Technology Insights within General Motors' global planning, he is currently responsible for identifying technology trends, exploring future implications, and cascading insights to stakeholders within the company. Dr. Goswami speaks at industry forums on emerging trends and future of the automotive industry. In addition to chairing SAE's Vehicle IoT Working Committee, he is also engaged in advisory capacities with organizations like LA Mobility, IQPC, etc. He holds a PhD in Applied Mechanics from Iowa State University, an MBA from University of Michigan, Go Blue, and he has a certificate as Foresight Professional from the University of Houston. Partha is going to present his perspectives on insights, thoughts, and trends and opportunities for CASE, case-based technologies in the decade ahead. Partha, the screen is all yours. If you hit the share screen button, your PowerPoint will come up and tell us a little bit more about this.
I'll do that. And I think I sent you my standard canned description, which I think was listening too long.
No. It's perfect though. Hey, listen, 25 years, it's a lot of work. So congratulations on all those successes. And we are looking forward to your insights.
All right, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can. We can see it in regular mode. Yeah, there you go, in PowerPoint.
All right. Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. And Ravi, thank you very much for that introduction and inviting me. I'll be talking about transformation of the industry as I have seen over the last 20 plus years. And this would be what I'm going to talk about. I'll start with a quick introduction about what the transformation is all about. Then we'll go into this case framework, connectivity, autonomous, ADAS, advanced driver assist, mobility services, mass mobility as a service, talk about electrification, how they're playing out. We'll try to touch a little bit on the importance of user experience, because ultimately it's not really technology. Consumers don't care about technology. They care about what they experience. And I'll try to sprinkle a little bit on some of the things we are seeing as an impact of COVID-19, pretty much on all the things if I have time. Now, I'll try to wrap my content within 15 minutes to give everybody time for discussion. And Ravi, if I cross a little bit, just let me know, okay? So with that, let me go into the introduction. So first thing is the transformation in the auto industry really started probably with smartphone, okay? And as consumers were experiencing their, not just smartphone, but any other consumer electronic device, they were essentially, they were trying to get the same experience in the car. Now, one issue is, as far as we are concerned, is on the life cycle. So think for a moment on the life cycle of a car, vehicle product development life cycle. Typically it's 3, 4, maybe 5 years. Now, within those 5 years, there might be 1, 3 or even more generation of a, let's say a smartphone or any other consumer electronics device. So we have, let's say, 3 life cycle within that. And within each of those life cycle, a device might go up or get multiple refreshes. Their apps get updated, their look and feel gets updated, the OS gets updated, everything gets updated. And consumers see that and say, why can't I have that in my car? So I guess that's where the main transformation started. And to adapt to that transformation, one of the things the auto industry realized that they need to do is need to evolve the vehicle as a platform rather than a collection of hardwares. You put an engine, you put the doors, etc. No, that's not going to work. Somehow it has to be defined by software. Now, that does not mean the car will actually become a device which gets refreshed and gets a product development life cycle of a year or less. That's not going to happen because there are many more complexity. So that's kind of the main background. And the hypothesis here is that the car is going to transform increasingly to an on-demand, less owned, more shared, and electric and autonomous, what we call the 4 pillars: CASE, connected, autonomous, electrified, and services. Okay, so let's talk about CASE a little bit. Even though CASE, everybody talks about CASE and lumps it together with other 3, in my mind, actually connectivity, or C, is really an enabler. It's a critical enabler to make other 3 things happen: autonomous, electric, and mass or mobility as a service. So we know that by 2025, roughly, most OEMs, most brands, they would probably have embedded connectivity. So that's going to happen. It hasn't happened today, even though we talk about connectivity. Not every car that comes out of a plant right now is connected, but we are getting there. And to help connectivity support all these other 3 areas, another big transformation that is happening is electrical architecture. And the vehicle electrical architecture is increasingly beginning to look like a computer, where you have Ethernet network, you have gateway. You want to make sure that instead of a dedicated ECU, electronic control unit or computer for each function, you are having more domain controllers. So that's let's keep connectivity aside for a moment. Let's move into autonomous. Autonomous, actually, the history is not that old. So we are looking at future, right? To look into the future, we need to understand what really happened in the past. So autonomous is roughly about 20 years old, and it really started after the first Gulf War, actually more like after 9/11, where an Army, DARPA specifically, Defense Advanced Research Project Administration, they through this challenge to the auto industry, what they call the Urban Challenge. And again, they were motivated by their own needs in the battlefield, so where they can send vehicles without drivers. So I think that continues to be a major goal and a project within Army itself. Nonetheless, within the civilian domain, that led to a series of races, and those who may have studied those know that there were several races that happened. Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, all those universities participated mainly. In particular, I know GM was involved in 2007. We won the race. And that really kickstarted industry's journey, and most importantly, fascination with autonomous. So, sorry, I think I need to go back. So what happened was, that's all good. We all started, but also at the same time, we know that industry, the social media became very active around the same time frame. Consumers, there are a lot more chatter, and that led to a lot of hype around autonomous. Everybody said, you know what, we are soon going to have this. The companies like BCG and other companies, they looked at a lot of advantages from a business point, but they really didn't focus on the technology aspect of it, which obviously is a tall order to make happen. So between, say, roughly 2015 and 2018, if we look at, or if we frame the whole discussion with respect to Gartner's hype cycle, we see that the autonomous probably was sitting at the top of the peak of the hype cycle.
Oh, I was just thinking about calling you.
Good, we're good.
Yo.
Okay. Can you hear me, Ravi?
What's that? Yes, we can.
Okay.
Ravi,
So
you're probably on mute.
So what happened was,
I can hear you. Go for it.
consumers probably thought that everything is going to happen, autonomous is going to hit the market, at least commercially speaking, by 2020. Clearly that hasn't happened. There is a resetting in the industry, and this is where we are currently. So if we look at Gartner hype cycle again, and this is nothing typical, this is a very old established framework that everybody uses, and I think it works very well, that any complex technology, it goes through a hype and then it comes down. There's the so-called slope of disillusionment where every
Okay, we are going to have Michigan connection issues. I think Partha might have just dropped off. Give him half a minute. In the meantime, let's just give him half a minute to connect back in. Partha, I think we lost you. Or is it me? Okay. I'll tell you what. Let's just give him half a minute.
It's Partha. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. You're back, Partha? No, he's lost. I think he's lost. So just give him half a minute, guys. I appreciate your patience. What he's going through is a fantastic framework. So that's okay. Partha, you have about 5 or 6 more minutes. So go for it.
So all I'm saying is we are going through a reset of.
You want to share your screen?
Relative to autonomy.
You want to share your screen?
Oh, okay. I'm not sharing that. Okay. Yep. Hang on a second.
By the way, did you know that we have 33 participants online? So welcome everybody. Please remember all your questions on the Q&A box. Partha, we are seeing your email. You might want to kill that. There you go. Perfect. Yes.
Okay. All right.
So Partha, one thing might help is to turn off your video for now.
Okay, that's a good point.
No, not
Speaking
the
of
email.
Networking experience.
We're still seeing your email, by the way. You want to kill that email, Partha?
Hang on.
So while he's doing that, remember the chat questions go on the Q&A box. We have 3 exciting more panelists here, and we are going to have a conversation, and then we are going to take Q&A after 1 o'clock. Okay. So just setting up the expectations. 33 people online. Perfect. Partha, go for it.
Screen now.
I can see your email screen, not your PowerPoint screen.
Oh, email. No, you can.
Yeah, I can see your external event details for tomorrow.
So you can see the
calendar.
I'm trying to show. Yeah. So it's okay. Okay. It says I'm sharing. Okay. So I don't know what's happening.
You want to kill the share? There you go. That's what you want to share. Perfect. Okay. Go for it. Go into full screen mode. And believe me, we are not. Zoom is such a beautiful thing. Raymond, our guest speaker, will tell us about all the headaches that went through the WebEx thing, right, Raymond? We are glad we are using Zoom. So we're glad we are using.
So what are you seeing now, Ravi? I'm so sorry. What are you seeing now?
You're looking at Autonomous Tech Today. Where is Autonomous Tech Today? Go for it.
Okay. So
Yeah, but we're looking at the other. We are looking at the other screen though. It's your presenter screen, not the audience screen.
Just go into presentation mode.
No.
Oh, I think he did. Switch. There's a switch screen at the Zoom side, I think.
No, it's completely his screen, right? Fit to window.
Let me do this.
There. So we can see that. We can go through this, Partha.
Okay, can you see the full screen now?
Perfect. Perfect. Go for it.
Okay. All right. So I'm so sorry about all this.
That's okay.
Okay.
That's
so
okay.
All I'm trying to say is, we are at a point where autonomous, the way people understand, the level 4, level 5 is going to take a long time. And where the industry right now, we are really trying to spread the level 2, level 2 autonomous technology. But what I wanted to share with you guys is that there are certain challenges with respect to autonomous, which is the edge cases. And I'm not going to go through the details, but suffice to say that there are many unique cases that we encounter as a driver every day. And honestly, developing capability for that through AI is going to take much longer than industry originally thought. So we see companies like NVIDIA, who just a few years back basically was in the forefront and they still are, but they are basically pivoting back to the level 2 rather than saying we are going to have level 5 or full autonomy or level 4 in the next few years. And I think pretty much every company is in that same realm, something to keep in mind. Okay, so let me quickly talk about mobility services. It's pretty much the same thing. We are at a point where we are seeing a little bit of cooling. So what I would say the balance between the shared mobility, personal mobility, they are being worked out a little bit. Even though Uber and Lyft and Didi and any other company, Get over the world, Ola in India, even though they are still very popular, certainly from a OEM side, there is a little bit of cooling. So the company-owned services like ShareNow for BMW, Daimler, Maven for my company, GM, those are all pulled out recently, and I've seen largely because of operational issues, not necessarily the main value proposition. There are some slowdown in that. So I guess mobility is going through that phase either, but that was pre-COVID. If you look at post-COVID, actually the challenges on mobility or mass is actually much higher, because if you look at some of the numbers that some of the survey that was done by, actually many of the surveys were done, I'm showing the one by IBM, and that basically says that in 2020, since people are very unwilling to go to big crowds in general, we will see that there's a huge drop that already has happened, will continue to happen in mass transit. But for ride-sharing user, you can see 50% or more, they would either use the service less or stop using it completely. So I think there are some challenges going forward with mass. We'll have to see how the whole thing evolves. Okay, the last thing is electrification. Electrification actually is a slightly different story. Actually, there is a lot of momentum given that so many OEMs and other companies, they are hugely committed to this. And this is not just Tesla, this is pretty much every other company who are coming up with future products, okay? And the reasons are pretty simple. Reason is more economic than anything else. We are continuously working to bring down the cost of battery. So both at the cell level and pack level, and there's a magic number, which is $100 per kilowatt hour, which is considered as an accepted threshold. And I think we are kind of increasingly homing in, going closer and closer to that threshold. That's number one. Number two, scalable design. So instead of one-off product that we have developed in past, for example, Bolt we mentioned earlier, we have another car called Bolt. Those are all one-off cars. Now, for example, my company is going into a modular design where we have one single platform that we can expand or shrink or expand into a variety of platforms, so that you can go into small car to a large truck, basically from one design. So I think that scale is also helping to expand the future possibility or larger deployment of EVs. Now, it doesn't mean there are no challenges. Certainly, charging infrastructure, the fast charging capability, so that consumers can have the same experience they have today for filling gas. I think those are still some, factors that need to be worked out. But you can see the progress has been pretty exciting. And finally, you can see that the operating cost of the car, the electric car itself, is generally speaking so low that makes an attractive value proposition for example, for fleet. So I'm not going to talk about the last point. I think I'm pretty much at the end of the line, but all I'll say is if 2010 was was the decade of smartphone on wheels as a concept for car, the future is really about car as a living space, or car as a living space on wheels. Now that also means there are a lot of challenges, because today with all the technologies going to the car, it does look like a kitchen sink. You have all kinds of alerts, you have warnings, you have displays, you have all kinds of things going on. And that has resulted in a lot of confusion, especially among older consumers. And that's necessarily not something that can sustain. So what's going on right now, a need for simplification of HMI. And I'm mentioning this because you have all the folks that are, in your ecosystem, you're talking about innovation. We need a huge innovation in human-machine interface, or the user experience in the cockpit. Cockpit in the car today is roughly what it used to be 10, 20, 30 years back. It hasn't changed in a qualitative sense, because it still is the same paradigm. So we need to change that paradigm. We need to make it a lot more intuitive. And there are technologies which can help, where AI can help personalize a lot of functions. Your over-the-air can actually, instead of having all the features in one shot, you can gradually introduce the features into the car so that the consumer is not overwhelmed. They can get some training and then continue to get more updates. So those are some of the things we need to happen. So with that, I think this is my last slide, summary and conclusion. Again, as I said, the case are still the key pillars of automotive transformation, and we are basically at early phase. Even though the hype around autonomous has been overwhelming for the last few years, but now I think we've come to a point where we understand the complexity and things will happen in a little bit more evolutionary fashion. Electrification is different. We are gathering momentum globally. And finally, and I kind of just barely touched on it, but COVID-19, impact of COVID-19 is actually felt not just in how we drive, but get ride, but also how we buy vehicles. I haven't talked about that, but the dealer-based physical buying process is also getting an overhaul. We are seeing more touchless or contactless buying, and every car company is trying to come up with solutions to do that. And that's not just true for US, I think it's true for China, and probably more in China. And we have seen a lot of examples of companies like Geely, for example. They have been introducing what they call drone-based key delivery. That might have been a little bit of gimmick, but certainly it just plays to the consumers' concern about contactless or touchless transactions, and we'll continue to see more of that. So with that, I'll stop.
Brilliant. Partha, that is so nice. Setting up this is so good of you to set up the platform for us for this conversation with the cases framework that General Motors is using. Thank you very, very much. Our next speaker is Alexander Edwards. Alexander Edwards is president of Strategic Vision, a market research firm based in San Diego, California. He has been president of Strategic Vision since 2010 and is responsible for the overall course and direction of the company. In addition to developing future leadership and setting managerial targets, he oversees all operations and executive level client development. He is recognized as an industry-leading expert on automotive research and is frequently quoted on various publications and at various conferences. He was instrumental in creating the foundational support for large quantities of research studies like New Vehicle Experience Study, which actually takes surveys of pre-buyer data and experiences, and it's a psychology-based survey which is industry-leading in its offering. He was an integral part of Strategic Vision's worldwide growth in international consultancy, from products ranging from Coca-Cola to national and international governments. By the way, I parenthesize that by saying I'm proud to have Alexander as a partner as we enter the India market, as we help Strategic Vision enter the India market. Alexander is heavily involved in the San Diego local area and volunteering in multiple missions there. Alexander is going to talk about mobility needs, also known as times they are a-changin'. Alexander, the screen is all yours. If you press the share screen button at the bottom, you have about 15 minutes for your conversation. And I can see your screen perfectly. Thank you. And I think you need to unmute yourself.
Already done.
There you go. Perfect. Alexander, welcome. Thank you. Sorry about the initial tech issues. We are on Zoom. We are trying to make the best we can. So thank you for joining, and thank you for your time, Alexander. Welcome.
Not a problem. And before I start, I'll just sort of make a nice comment toward the rabbit hole we could go down. I liked in the question in the web chat there about why is Tesla's stock price the way it is? And that could be an hour conversation the way it is. But
I was assuming that was from another charter member friend of mine, Dhawal, who inevitably raises that and is very active in that. But we'll go down that rabbit hole later. Mobility times are changing.
Great rabbit hole. I just couldn't let it go unnoticed. And so I prepared this for Bob Dylan. If you understand that, then terrific. Otherwise, we'll just continue with the presentation. To understand mobility needs and a lot of the things about what we just took a look at. We just saw a great presentation, understanding the curve of the technology acceptance of fully autonomous driving And we're going to share why on the consumer side, why there may be a slow acceptance rate. And to understand that, you have to understand value-centered psychology. A lot of the data you're going to see from us comes from a survey we do of 250,000 new vehicle buyers annually here in the US. Of course, we also conduct it globally as well. The key thing to take away from value-centered psychology is that there is a way that values and emotions are built upon each other that can complete a consumer's emotional needs and desires. It starts with a foundation of security. People have to trust it, feel it's reliable, it's safe, be comfortable with it before they can enjoy the freedom, which is expressing individuality, doing the things they want to do, go the places they want to go, and be hassle-free. If those things are there, then the consumer can say, hey, this is fun, this is exciting, I'm proud of what I'm doing. If that's there, you then meet balance or harmony, having your needs met. And that ultimately leads to love, where a consumer will say, I love this product or service. And they can then go through and tell you emotionally what they love about it. And usually there are product attributes that are connected to that. And we're going to find that autonomous driving and what consumers think about that are going to be greatly rooted there in security. Now, it isn't that esteem or love is more important than security and safety. It's that if you don't have safety and security, you cannot experience the higher emotions. It's the foundation. And we do a number of innovative scaling in the questions that we ask that really magnify the statistical differences between points on a scale. When someone tells you that they love something versus just satisfactory versus a failure, each point on the scale we've discovered has a different mathematical equation to predicting advocacy, acceptance rate, conquest, loyalty, etc. And if you don't believe me, next time go home to a spouse and say she's done a satisfactory job rather than you love her, and you'll understand why the points on the scale are very different. When it comes to security and understanding this sort of foundation from which choices are made and focusing in on new vehicles, we receive verbatims from folks all the time that talk specifically about how important safety is and what's going to happen if their safety needs are either overlooked and not met. And in fact, sometimes just simply overlooking a safety feature can create so much anger, a consumer won't come back to the brand again. We ran a regression analysis of 113 different product attributes to how secure they feel in their vehicle. And as you might guess, some of the top pieces are impression of durability, image of the vehicle, brand image, driving performance. When you can put the foot on the accelerator and accelerate quickly, you feel more safe and secure in that vehicle than if it's less responsive. And then if you go, there's a whole bunch of other pieces you can go to. For example, 53 to 58 show how even interior lighting has a connection to feeling secure. And you can see what the top and the bottoms are. For example, overall driving experience, they're near the top of feeling secure, while gas or electric mileage, fuel economy actually provides some of the least in enhancing that feeling of security. One of the reasons why electric vehicle adoption in the US has been a difficult thing is because when people look at the BEV technology, there are concerns about overall safety and comfort and having to make compromises for that vehicle. And that then brings us directly into autonomous vehicles. If you were to ask folks in the automotive industry, do you love your car? You get an average score, we call a commitment score of 562. effectively, most people love or find delightful the new vehicle they purchase. And that's great. People who buy their vehicles love them. Very few people say, yeah, I just bought my brand new car and I absolutely hate it. That's a good thing. And if we take a look at what attributes are directly connected to that love, you can see, for example, driving performance, exterior styling, maneuverability, braking, all of these enhance love of the vehicle. What doesn't enhance love? Well, third row roominess, affordability to buy, voice recognition. These are areas that vehicles are often struggling with right now. And you can see the top vehicles here, BMW 7 Series, Volvo XC90, Subaru Outback. These are vehicles that people absolutely love, but we also like to say that even Chevrolet Cargo Express vans can receive love as well. And you can see that in their verbatim statements as well about what they love. And they'll often talk about features, how that's built on safety and reliability, and how they then become advocates when safety and love are connected together. When it comes to fully autonomous vehicles, and we ask people that are actually buying new vehicles today, hey, what do you think about a fully autonomous vehicle to purchase and to drive and to have? The commitment score is in the negatives. And the reasons for that are a few. One is, in the news, people like to report when there are failures of this technology. And that gets into people's mind. Number two, people do not have a large amount of experience with this technology, and therefore they feel less comfortable and secure. Long story short, part of the reason why the technology hasn't moved faster is the consumer demand for this technology is still relatively low. Most people who buy vehicles today aren't demanding this technology. Now, there is good news in that when it comes to the features that assist driving, there is significant love. Whether it's overall driving assist or backup cameras, blind spot warnings, lane departure, adaptive driving assist with cruise control, smart park, etc. People love these ideas. When they get in them, they try them, they feel more comfortable. So even though today there isn't a demand for level 4 and 5, the love that people have for level 2 is strong enough that we believe that the curve will increase quickly as consumers have lovely experiences, positive experiences with these features. And we'll move on to other parts of mobility. For example, we talk a lot about ride hail, ride share, and how this type of technology really is something that would replace automobiles. And people thought, yeah, it's just going to change everything. Well, it did one thing. It set up Hertz to go for bankruptcy because people stopped using them for rental cars. But did it change overall vehicle ownership? And the answer is no. And the reason is because ride hail has a ability to augment travel for those that already have personal mobility solved. It is not a replacement. It is an augment. In fact, most new vehicle buyers will provide a commitment score between 1 and 200, or they enjoy getting into an Uber less than they enjoy getting into a Cargo Express van, a Chevy Cargo Express van. It's not an ideal, lovely experience. Instead, it's an augmentation to do something. And what is that something? Well, we can take a look at demographics and what people are doing. You know, why in the world did Hertz go away? Really because of this piece where you see taxi. They gave up on taxis. They gave up on rental cars. And they went with this subsidized version of getting into these other vehicles. Why are they getting into them? Because it's a convenient way for younger males to get drunk. And that's the data. I mean, it's overwhelmingly, that's what it's used for. Now, it's also used to get to a venue that they probably don't want to park at, where the payment just to get there and back is about the same as parking, a little more hassle-free, etc. But with convenient, less expensive, and way to go so I can be completely enabled to move, that is what this has been successful for, augmenting. Drivers mostly are using gas-powered vehicles. And when they're, even during peak hours, they have 5 minutes of downtime on average. And what are they doing? They're looking for a place to park. So we have these vehicles that are running that have nobody in them. And we are just using all of it, sending out significantly more emissions than we probably ever hoped to have saved. That being said, drivers today are saying, if they could switch to a hybrid in the future, it is something that they are seriously looking into. While some are still saying gas is better, hybrid really is what people are looking for in this place. We did a little fun survey a few months back about what is mobility going to be like in 2040? And people who buy cars today, when they think about mobility as a whole, not just personal vehicle ownership, it comes into about 371. So when it's not as great as a BMW 7 Series, it's not as great as owning your own personal car, but you know, it's better than a bus, a cargo express van, and even better than a Honda Accord. So it's not a bad thing, it's an okay thing. In fact, as you can see, 3/4 of people say that it's excellent or better. Not bad, room for improvement. All that being said, you know, when it comes to overall mobility, we then say, okay, what do you think it's going to be like in 2040? And we like this, you know, people were writing in the survey, look, I won't be around, I'll be dead. Regardless, I'm not a fan of driverless cars. Of course, it would be a Buick owner. Going to move on. Sorry, GM. But we ask questions like, you know, what do you think it's going to be like? People would write all of these hilarious pieces like more mass transit, more clean cars, more travel by 2 wheels, more electric vehicles, flying cars, rail will be obsolete. Given the crazies in the government and those running for office, I have no idea. And then, of course, we can match those up to Volvo people thinking people in the government are crazy, and Volvo XC90 people are looking for more mass transit. And of course, Dodge Journey people think flying cars are where the future is going to be. And most of us will think that if you buy a Dodge Journey, you're delusional anyway. Okay, sorry again for the humor. I hope people can take that. We then went back and asked people, so this is what you think of mobility today. How would you rate what you think mobility is going to be like in 2040? And this data is pre-COVID. The commitment score was 18. That's really not great. It means that there's significant uncertainty for the future. The current solutions that people see for mobility in the future do not seem to be real, and they are wondering where things are going to go in the future. If we do look at post-COVID data, we could see that unless you are a BEV advocate, you're probably going to be staying away from electric vehicles. Part of that comes from employment changes, where we can see that 44% of people that are buying vehicles in March and April are now working more often in a home environment. Another 5% have lost their job. Another 5% are not working but not getting paid. Another 8% are not working but have some level of pay that was going on for them. And when you say, well, how is this going to have an impact on your personal transportation needs? 18% say they are less likely to use ride-hail services like Uber and Lyft. 28% less likely to use public transportation. 74% are not needing to drive as often for errands as they did. So with that, I promised Ravi 10, 15 minutes. That was 40 slides in 15. I will end there. Thank you very much.
That's absolutely brilliant. Alexander, that was fantastic. That is What a beautiful follow-up to a very good presentation from General Motors. Now we know how these things balance out, what consumers are thinking about it. So thank you for those insights. I saw that you did not quote Elon Musk in one of those slides. So while you had it on the slide, you kind of overrode it, but I love that quote from Elon Musk itself, about Elon Musk. So incredible insights. Thank you very much for that. BEV, by the way, is battery electric vehicles. We are going to come back with questions and answers at the end of the conversations with Raymond and Charles. And so please make sure you type in your questions and we will come to all of them after the conversation. It is my pleasure to introduce the next speaker. He has such a great background. He comes from another industry that had been at the leading edge of this. So I think what he brings in from a personally, I think what he brings into the automotive industry is absolutely fantastic. I'm so glad that he is now in the automotive industry. Raymond Zhang is Managing Director, Honda Innovations, a corporate venturing and open innovation arm at Honda Innovations, where he leads a global team to identify, develop, and bring strategic and transformative opportunities to Honda. What a beautiful brand to do that too. Parthoda, this thing, no pun intended, but move on. It covers areas of automotive, robotics, connected vehicles, personal shared services, and industrial innovation, energy innovation, and other potential new businesses. So Raymond, welcome. Let's start off by you telling us about Honda and Honda Innovations. And I believe you have a couple of slides, so press the share slide button and the screen is all yours.
All right, thank you, Ravi and Ty, for this wonderful opportunity. And really, this is why I love my job, right? This is where we learn from each other. Every time doing something like this, I learn. This time I learned from Dr. Goswami with, Alexander. It's fantastic, right? This is also poking fun. I noticed, right. Dr. Edwards kind of, poking the Honda a little bit. I totally accept it. This is part of the fun.
He poked at Buick, by the way. He really went after Buick, but that's okay. Chevy panel man is the best in his category, but that's okay.
And Dr. Goswami, thanks for setting up the scene. So it saved me a lot of work to going into this, because part of it I cover also sort of autonomous and mobility as well. So before I start my sharing, I want to just talk a little bit about Honda. So believe me, this is not just a pitch for me for Honda and Honda Innovation, but actually for me, it's actually try to provide an opportunity for entrepreneurs to engage with us. I think, just after that, you know what I'm talking about. So let me, without further ado, let me just go into the presentation mode. All right.
Perfect.
Okay, so you're seeing the full screen, right?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. So I think I don't need to do a in-depth introduction of Honda. A lot of people do know Honda by cars, but motorcycles.
Hey,
and
Raymond,
this is a company.
Hey,
yes?
Raymond, just before you go into the Honda presentation, would you mind talking a little bit about your Cisco background? Because I set you up saying that's a perfect transition to the automotive industry, which is very unique, right?
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about that, sure. And then we are looking forward to this. So I know I skipped that part of your
fantastic. Bio. Yeah, so before I started at Honda, which was 2-3 years ago, right? It seems like a long time now. I worked for Cisco. So I was part of the Cisco team where I have done so many different things. I started as an engineer and moved to architect, but the second half of life, my Cisco, was really about looking at startups and looking at opportunities and really helping Cisco to buy companies by looking at technology strategy, looking at talent. I ran the, sort of a technical due diligence for Cisco for a couple of years, close to 30, M&A deals. And also spent a lot of time running innovation center in Cisco, more of like a CTO role. It's a global organization across the world. What we did there was trying to understand what the startup innovators offers and how it can combine with Cisco's offer and mutually beneficially generating revenues together. So about 2-3 years ago, I got excited about autonomous driving and a lot of different things. And So when I have this opportunity to move into Honda, and not just Honda, it's actually Honda Innovation, I really just jumped. There's no question asked there. So Honda, being a 70-year-old company, needed a lot of change, and they know that. And that's why they have this organization to help them to change and transform themselves. And these are kind of things I'm really interested in doing. So that's basically my background.
Thank you for that. And that's a great, very rich background. So all yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So essentially, Honda, as you know, is one of the automaker companies, but we sell about 5 million cars across every year. But you probably don't know, we actually sell 20 million motorcycles with a 6 million power unit like engines. If you count those up, it's probably the largest power equipment / engine maker in the world. And also 3 years ago, we actually ventured into the aerospace. We actually have now a Honda jet running around. So on top of it, we also spend a lot of time and effort looking at robotics. Some of them actually might have seen the droid robot, the Asimo, right, kicking balls around and all that. This is really a research project. So what I'm trying to say is, Honda in itself, given so many different product lines, the contact service of Honda and the innovation community is large. So there are a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs to work with Honda. Okay. So as strong as Honda is, like I said before, they realize the world is moving faster than they can cope. With all these cloud computing, with all the development in software, with AI, I think it's just dazzling speed. Honda realized, it's not enough just to do everything themselves. They do have to rely on external community and just catch the wave, so to speak. And that's why they actually kind of build out these organizations in Silicon Valley and trying to kind of understand what's happening in the world and kind of leverage that to transform themselves. And that's why this group is kind of born. Historically, it started, about back in 2005 or so. They actually established a corporate VC arm in Silicon Valley. It wasn't too successful. So 2011, they actually bringing a small R&D team and doing, basically research projects and trying to understand people using smartphone, what does it mean for the car. In fact, actually for Honda, this is the group actually started integrating Android Auto and Apple CarPlay with the Honda products. So by 2012, they morphed themselves into building working with developers, to doing in-car experience and trying to play around with different human-machine interfaces and try to understand where the world goes and try to explore that. So with all these successes and failures, there's a lot of learning to be done as an innovation arm, and we always adapting ourselves and to the changes. So by 2017, evolved into this entity today called Honda Innovations, right? And basically, it's a bridge to the outside world. We work with venture capital, venture incubators, all these different entities, trying to really bring the technology into Honda. It actually, got into expanded into a global organization. It started, of course, in the heart of it in the Silicon Valley, and of course, we need to go to Detroit because that's where the automotive is. On top of it, we also start looking at Canada and East Coast based on different innovation kind of hotspots that show up. We then moved on to Europe and Israel. Israel, as you know, is actually one of the hotspots for innovation in mobility and transportation. There are a lot of entrepreneur spirits there, so that's why we are actually expanding there with people on the ground. And the last things I did was I built up the program in China, right? China is sort of a parallel universe. There are a lot of things that doesn't go across the border, particularly at this point. But we do believe, given its social structure, given how it's organized, a lot of innovation could give us a hint of what could come next for the rest of the world. So that's why we have this global presence, and we have a great team to work on that. So what do we do? What is our focus areas, right? So of course we do, if you look at AI technology, robot intelligence, that cut across pretty much what we think the future would require. So we're looking at technologies for these type of things. We're looking at, connected vehicle, as some of the panelists has mentioned. Also, human-machine interface, how people and machine interact to enhance the experience. Because Honda has a manufacturing sites around the world, so we also looking at how innovation got into manufacturing in this industrial usage, and try to leverage that as well. As you also know, we mentioned here mobility services, right? It's about people, share mobility, and we are also looking at the community, the innovation community to see where things are going and what can we do with it. One of the interesting thing also is vehicle data business. They are, as some panelists have mentioned before, car will be basically a platform for personal experience, and there are a lot of data and business to be had there. So we're trying to explore that. Go hand in hand with mobility is energy, right? So how do you get the energy? How do you store it? How do you distribute it? How do you charge? So we're also looking at that. It's also one of the important areas that we look at. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're doing something like this, come to us, let's talk and see what are things we can do it together.
What a fascinating.
So what did we actually, what exactly do we, what exactly do we offer, right? Before this year, actually, we were going after what they call the open innovation model. Really, we put out non-diluting funding to startups, and the VC loved us for that, of course. So we are trying to, we find and select interesting technologies. We collaborate, bring them and do proof of concepts together. We fund those proof of concepts. In different places, we can actually provide spaces and cars if necessary, or motorcycles. On top of it, what the startups really love us a lot for it is because we also provide mentorships to work with them to kind of help them to understand what are the challenges facing to build a vehicle, to build a motorcycle, right? So that they can be tuned into those customer needs. So that was the last 2-3 years we have been doing that. This year, we are actually focused, we have been doing investment as well, but this year we are now expanded and putting more focus on investment as well. So these are some of the examples of what some of the so-called success stories or startups that we engage that can tell the story about. A quick example is it's the best thing is electrical car, right? So the story that automotive OEMs have some definition. So we were looking for sort of
Hey Raymond, you're breaking up. You're breaking up. Did that microphone did you just move your microphone or something? You started breaking up a lot.
Okay, how about now?
Much better.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. And so SangHong is one of these companies. We eventually ended up investing into SangHong. DriveMove is an application to help users to operate a vehicle while and safely doing some apps, running on some apps, and help them to navigate, help them to do things that they can do in the car. So we worked with them, started with open innovation POCs, and it eventually ended up bought them as a startup company. And now they are in the mission of helping to bring mobility services into Honda as a unit by itself. So those are the sort of the story that I wanted to share with you.
Brilliant.
So that's what I have for our side.
Excellent. So let's just go dig a little bit deeper before we get on to Charles. We have a couple more minutes here. Tell us a little bit more about mobility. Mobility seems to be a big theme for Honda. What exactly does it mean, and where do you see the future? What does the future look like?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I think, hold on a second. I think mobility means a lot of things have covered by the previous panelists, right? So mobility actually for us means moving people from A to B, right? So that includes everything from personal mobility, even to the point where there is how do you move people that's impaired down the block, right? How do you move across multiple blocks, with scooters and things like that. So that's that. And then also, of course, motorcycle and travel long distance with cars. We also think about the services that involve with that as well. So, share services. On top of it, we are also keeping a very close eye on urban air mobility, right? Sometimes called vertical takeoff and landing. So this is like the Uber flights. So those are of interest to us. Of course, we also have the Honda Jet. So we're looking at things around flying hundreds of miles or thousands of miles that can help people to move. So those are sort of hardware I was talking about that in our mind is a kind of our scope of interest. Mm-hmm. More than that, I think it's all about, as some of the experts alluded to, it's really about experience as well. For Honda, it's actually important to make sure whatever you do, wherever you go, how you do it, it has to be fun. So that's part of, for us, is thinking how to make things fun during your move around. So that's also a topic of interest for us as well. Yeah, so that's really excellent. Across different. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. One last, just a thought. Give us some thoughts about 3D mobility, and what do you think? Where do you think? Do you think we can ride a taxi in flying taxi in 10 years?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very interesting area. I know, we can joke about it, about how mature it is, but if you go back to the background, if you look at all the predictions people made today, Morgan Stanley predicted as much as $1.5 trillion by 2040, right? The more conservative ones, like Porsche Consulting, predicted about only $4 billion by 2035. And then the times also vary. So some people predicted, up to 2035, 2040. Uber is slated and claimed they're going to have 20,000 vehicles by 2030. Right, so it really depends on who you talk to, the number vary. Why is that, right? I think it's interesting because that's actually tied to Dr. Edwards' kind of psychology, right? There are no solid business can be made because there's so many uncertainties in people's psyche. And, it's basically everybody's guess, but there are some people now putting quite a bit of money into this type of things, like Joby as a startup had got investment from Toyota and SoftBank for close to $600 million. Lilium from Germany also got like $275 million investment very recently in the last couple months. For me personally, this is really just my personal opinion. It's nothing, it's not a Honda's opinion. The way that I think about it, I'm actually drawing a little parallel between autonomous driving cars and the UAM space, the urban mobility space, right? If you think about autonomous driving, it started with full stack startup players, but very soon you have all these startups building different components for the system. You got sensors, LiDAR, radar, you got softwares, you got all the simulation behind it. And then that's where it actually go up to the top of the curve. And by doing that, it actually created an environment where to make this, and then supply side, make this happen. And I haven't seen that, unfortunately, with the VTOL or the UAM side. Today, there's really a few of them are really still driving and looking at the full stack playing. There aren't a lot of people doing LiDAR. A lot of people doing radar for this type of device, and there are not a lot of people thinking through the navigation, right? So I think if you look at the curve, I think it's going to take longer than 2030. The other sort of parallel I'm trying to draw, and not quite parallel, but is the way to think about it is DARPA Challenge, right? It started at 2004, 2005, and then Urban Challenge 2007. It's a very important milestone to push the autonomous vehicle industry forward. And that was some 15 years ago, right? This is where the talents come out. This is where people start thinking as a sort of a loosely community, how to build this together. And if you look at VTOL, the first grand challenge will be next year, right? And there are also quite a bit of lack of talent there as an industry as a whole. And 2022 is really first time, I believe, for the industry to get together and thinking about how to work together, how to make sure we don't crush each other, so to speak, right? And so if you're thinking about that line and adding on top of the regulatory challenges, I think it's at least 15, 17 years away, to be honest. That's my opinion.
Thank you. But very interestingly, the CES presentation from Hyundai, my old alum, I'm a Hyundai alum, what Hyundai is doing with Uber is very, very interesting. So looking forward to those insights, fantastic insights. Truly, truly appreciate it, Raymond. That's thank you. Keep those questions coming to the audience. We have a lot of people. Keep those questions coming. It is my pleasure to introduce our final speaker. I happened to meet him in our last panel, which was done by Nitin Bajaj, and he's such a wealth of experience. He's a car guy too. So Charles Owen is partner EV2 Ventures. EV2 Ventures, a pre-Series A venture capital firm focusing on mobility and transportation technology, specifically in smart logistics and electric vehicle systems. EV2 has completed a number of early stage investments in early stage mobility companies in India. So this is getting a global perspective. So I'm so glad to have Charles. Charles, thank you for coming. Previously, Charles was, this is the most important part of that, right? Previously, Charles was Vice President, Global Mergers and Acquisitions for Harman International, a car company with amazing radios and an amazing portfolio of radios, a Fortune 500 company and a global leader in connected car technology. He's an alum of Vanderbilt University and holds a law degree from Georgetown and an MBA from Wharton. So welcome, Charles. Tell us a little bit more about your fund, and you get this strong background in automotive industry, and now you're taking this to India. So please give us your perspectives on observations and opportunities. Charles.
Great. Thanks for the introduction, Ravi. And it was really interesting listening to the rest of the panelists, because I'd spent the previous 9 years before moving to India at a tier 1. So, we were the ones trying to be out there, figuring out what was going to be, next in the industry. So as you pointed out, Harman, many people know Harman Sound Systems, Harman Kardon, JBL, Mark Levinson, but most of Harman's automotive business is actually in-vehicle infotainment, IVI. So primarily for the German OEMs, Daimler, Audi, BMW. They've done some work with Chrysler in the past. And so when I was running M&A, a lot of the things that I was looking at would be technologies that you heard the panelists discussing: LiDAR, radar, thermal imaging, V2V, V2X. We acquired an OTA, over-the-air update company out of Israel, Redbend, a cybersecurity company out of Israel. And then to kind of part this conversation, we acquired an engineering outsourcing services business unit out of India with several thousand engineers, because we're looking at the cars becoming the largest handset in the market. And so how do you find 5,000 engineers with UI, UX, HMI, cloud, data analytics, and how do you hire them without going bankrupt? And so the thought was, well, we'll buy a business where they're serving all of the customers in this space and gradually become their largest customer. And that was the Symphony Telecom acquisition. And then Harman was acquired by Samsung in 2017. As many consumer electronics players look to have a larger participation in the automotive OEM world. And I had the opportunity to move to India and thought I would take this automotive technology experience and my previous role in operations at a supply chain company and look at smart mobility, which we define as anything that moves people or things in the environment in India. And it's interesting to hear then our conversations with you, Ravi, because you're looking at helping businesses go from the US to India, and I'm looking at Indian companies solving Indian problems. So I think it's really interesting the type of work you're doing. So I think it's pretty cool, and hopefully it's very successful. So I was going to discuss a handful of the things that the previous speakers had touched on. I can just share my screen here briefly. Hopefully that works.
Getting it perfect. We can see your screen.
Okay, good. Awesome. So, when you talk about CASE in India, connected, autonomous services and mobility and electric, if you've ever been to India and if you've ever driven on the roads in India, there really is no autonomy. I mean, there are no lanes from, when you can't have lane departure warning because there are no real lanes. So the, level 2, level 1, or just basic ADAS features that we consider in the vehicle, if they are there, they aren't really present. The other thing to understand about the roads in India is that 85% of vehicles on the roads are two-wheelers and three-wheelers. So when people talk about the automotive market, almost initially we jump to, automotive OEMs because that's where you are in America, right? Like motorcycles, there are no three-wheelers, or maybe just they're kind of fancy toys or something on the outside. They're not really a normal mode of transportation. So what we'll really talk about will be electric and mobility. But to touch on one thing that Partha said earlier on when he talked about the car becoming the largest cell phone and how the car lasts for 3 to 5 years, and that's several cell phone generations. What he didn't mention is as a tier 1, you get the RFQs 3 years before the start of production for the vehicle. So it's 3 to 5 years for the vehicle, but as a tier 1 who's developing in-vehicle infotainment systems, you have 3 years to develop that, during which you have several different turns of the cell phone, and then the car lasts for 3 to 5 years. So it's even a longer process.
And after resale too, so which is
yes, and then after resale and all the services. That's where over-the-air updates and other technologies are coming in and hoping to future-proof the vehicle. But in India specifically, when you look at electrification, India has over a million electric vehicles on the road, and its sales are 3% of kind of what's being sold. Now, what's different is most of that really means lead-acid battery e-rickshaws is the vast majority of the market currently. There was a great article about this by Joanna Slater, who's the India Bureau Chief from the Washington Post recently, talking about the number of electric vehicles in India and lead-acid battery being there. It's interesting from an upward mobility standpoint because they're relatively inexpensive, and people who are using bicycle rickshaws or are in different lines of business can move into this space. And these are to transport people, right? So if you've seen an e-rickshaw like a tuk-tuk in Thailand, it'll hold 3 or 6, or if you're creative, 8 or 10 people kind of hanging off the sides of the vehicle. What's really interesting to us is more on the lead acid, more on the lithium ion side, and not the lead acid, and new technologies that are going around it. We've made kind of one investment there, but I wanted to point out to the market where people are really talking where people are really discussing EVs is if you've got a higher upfront cost for a vehicle and a lower per kilometer cost for your vehicle, then the real goal is to have the vehicle on the road as many kilometers as possible so that you amortize that higher upfront cost over the kilometers that you drive. The real use cases that we see there are in fleet and delivery. So mostly in the last mile space. Three-wheelers that are doing deliveries for Big Basket, Grofers, Flipkart, Amazons of the world. Two-wheelers that are doing Flipkart and Amazon during the day and transfer over to Swiggy and Zomato. Those would be food delivery services in the evening, and are really getting high utilization rates on their vehicles. It also works in rickshaws where you're taking people, but anything really where you're getting high utilization. One of the things that when you look at Alexander's presentation in psychology, he talked about the psychology and driving performance, styling, and braking. But the average four-wheel vehicle that's sold in India, the largest selling vehicle is the Maruti Swift, which is a very kind of what we would consider a very low-end vehicle. And I think it's because in India, ownership of a vehicle is important, but the badge and the styling of that vehicle isn't considered as important. BMW, Daimler, and Audi together sell less than 40,000 units a year in India. To put that in perspective, China sells 650,000 units of BMW. So India's big three German auto market is less than the spare parts market for China. And I think it's because in India, people are very practical when it comes to a vehicle. The road infrastructure is not that great. And they look at it and say, well, you pay 5 times the amount to do the same thing that I'm doing. Why would you do that? I don't understand what the value of that is for a depreciating asset. So that's where it really takes us into kind of the electric infrastructure and what we're seeing. So the markets there are quite dynamic. I think that there's a lot of people that are kind of just building knockdown kits from China. The companies that we're investing in and are actively pursuing are people with interesting intellectual property, primarily in the three-wheel space, where they have enterprise customers and have large order books and some form of technology IP around say, thermal management in India, where it can reach 115 degrees. You have to be able to submerge the battery because during monsoon season you have floods, and it's a very different traffic pattern. Nowhere else in India do you have the growth rates, the number of people, and kind of the infrastructure issues. So we're really looking at those Indian companies solving Indian problems. And then to kind of finish out, I think the other areas that we're interested in aren't there, but I'll talk about micromobility in India. And I think, one thing that I would talk about, you heard Alexander's talk about rideshare and whether or not people are decreasing their interest in rideshare. I think that's, potentially right in India. But if you look at the density of population, the number of cities, and the number of people that take trips, and micromobility is usually considered less than 5 kilometers or 5 miles in the US, right? And in India, it's hyper local. I mean, the number of trips are less than 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers is tremendous. And a lot of people don't have vehicles, and these provide things like safety and security for people trying to reach the workplace. There's not a lot of times not great sidewalk infrastructure, or if you're a young woman at night, you might feel more safe in a vehicle than walking down the street. And so these are modes of transportation that are growing. The question that we really have when we look at this space is there any way to differentiate from an end user standpoint from other people in the market? Is there anyone that can become really sticky, or is it just a pure scale play? We're interested more in the technologies that are supporting it. Electric is really interesting here because you have a high level of ownership. A high level of users, a number of kilometers that are used. And also because of the way sharing infrastructure works. So if you have in California and the US, Lime and Bird, the 2-wheeler scooters that you stand on, it really is not a market that functions in India because of the infrastructure. I mean, they take up a lot of sidewalk space in the US, but you don't have the sidewalks in India. And the sharing mindset is very different with the density of population in India than it is in the US. So we're looking at people who actually own the asset or have some ownership interest in the asset, and that way they take care of it and it lasts longer rather than kind of a shared model. But we've put this area a little bit on hold, trying to figure out where things go after COVID. It is all electric, but we're really pushing now in the electric area and logistics and supply chain, where we're seeing everyone really driving that. And it's back to the initial slide that I had, that in a 3-wheeler, the average cost, is it's 1/5 to 1/10 the cost per kilometer. And so this is not an environmental feel-good story, although that's a wonderful benefit. It's really an economic argument that says, listen, we've got higher uptime because you've got fewer moving pieces, and we've got a much lower cost per kilometer. And that's the story that's really happening in the electric market. And the only other thing I'd close with, Raymond talked about, 20 million motorcycles, and people don't talk about that here in the US. But if you go to India, it's huge. And you've got motorcycles the size of 100 cc's, right? I mean, and 100 cc is an engine that we don't really understand as being an engine for a motorcycle, right? That's not something we would consider. But if you only need to go 30 kilometers an hour, it transports a family of 4. And these are widely sold, and it's a huge market. And I also would like to say that I love to see the investments that you're doing. Having OEMs work with startups is a huge boost for startups. One of the companies that we've invested in did a pilot with Maruti Suzuki, and is now providing logistics supply chain tech for 20,000 of their vehicles. So going from proof of concept to beating out European and Western competitors, and being able to actually prove a startup and get a blue chip customer is really important to the startup community. So super glad to see that you're out there doing that type of work.
Yeah, let's talk offline on that one.
Yeah, what a fascinating company, Charles. This is absolutely incredible. You're actually putting feet in India and investing there for India, which is such a brilliant space. Thank you for that. Tell us a little bit about your fund.
Sure. So, right now I'm in Atlanta because that's where I moved from before. My wife works for Coca-Cola, so that's why we were in Atlanta. When I was working for Harman, I would just kind of fly back and forth to wherever the transaction was, whether it's Brazil or Israel or Detroit or wherever the deal is. And now we live outside of Delhi in Gurgaon. I came home for SARS, but we're, starting and looking at, we're generally the first professional investors in, and we're only talking to companies where we think we have, a strategic viewpoint, not just dollars. So where can I provide assistance in the supply chain operations background that I've had in the automotive technology, whether it's contacts in the OEM world, tier 1, tier 2 world, or in the supply chain logistics space where we are, I'm the guy that walks through the warehouse and kicks pallets and understanding kind of the operations and are they managing SKU movement as well. I mean, you're seeing all kinds of really interesting things in India happen with startups trying to provide warehousing SLAs that are similar to Amazon for SMBs. It's the technology mindset is really beautiful. And the great, interesting thing is the first wave of Indian entrepreneurs, everyone knows, right? It was Infosys, the Wipros, and they were Indian engineers developing products for the Western market. And we're really investing in Indian engineers solving Indian problems. And we don't think that you can bring in, especially in logistics and supply chain technology side, you know, Kuehne+Nagel or UPS and drop them into the Indian infrastructure and have them solve the problems that you see there, because the density of population and the infrastructure issues, and just what we talked about with, you know, with 85% of the vehicles being 3-wheelers and 2-wheelers, it's just a completely different world. And that's why we're there. And so far it's been great. It's super exciting. And I hope to be able to be back soon. So
congratulations. That's fantastic. Really, thank you very much to our speakers, Partha, Alexander, Raymond, Charles. That's fantastic. So thank you very much. We have a simulated applause that I will bring up later on. We have a lot of questions. So what I will do is I'll read out the questions. And participants, please start typing it in. We have 11 questions. I'll go through that in the Q&A, and I will try to direct it to specific people, but in case we don't, feel free to jump in, okay? I have 2 questions from an old friend of mine who's also an automotive industry veteran. He is tremendously experienced in the automotive industry, Mr. Sukhwinder Lamba. Thank you very much for joining in. You have 2 questions out here, so I will read them both out, and and if we can get some quick thoughts on this. So the first question is there any analysis on COVID-19 reality for effect on overall U.S. car market? That is, we have a seasonal a SAR of 17 million. Do you have any research? And I think this one is Alexander has done some work on it. Couple of competing forces as he sees it, as Sukhwinder sees it. Desire to get out of the home is less, so less need for a car. Hesitation to use public transport, and hence less need for a personal car. And his second question here, do you see autonomous challenge for trucking industry related to more of a last mile drivability versus most of the long haul freight driving on highways, say when trucks are going from East Coast to West Coast? Is that last mile problem solved somehow through the trucking industry more realistic? So Alexander, you want to quickly give us your thoughts on your COVID reality there, and then perhaps Partha, you can give us some insights on the trucking industry, and I'll go to Raymond and Charles on the next ones.
Terrific. So very briefly, we've talked about a pent-up demand where we haven't, even though there is less need for a personal vehicle, there still is a need there for most folks that are out there. So while some people are delaying a purchase, and some people are even trying to extend their leases a little bit longer so that they could be able to do something a little bit later down the road, we also see some people letting a lease go, and because they have 3 vehicles in the household, they've gone down to 2, but their ideal is 3, and when they have that capability, they're going to go out and do that again. So in short-term impact is going to be great, as we've already seen. But that's going to slightly, over the next year, die off until the pent-up demand is all expended and people are out at similar levels than where they were previously. Now, it is possible that a number of folks in this new reality will downsize downgrade. But again, we don't see that as a long-term, after 3 to 5 years, that's not going to be much of an issue. If you want a really good similarity to data we saw previously, was what was going on in 2008, everything from the financial crisis to, is anyone going to buy a Toyota again because of the technical problems that were happening? The answer is, people just said, well, we'll take a look for the next 6 months and see. And once they saw and saw everything was great, okay, we're coming back into market. There's also another force out there right now it's not just COVID and the protests and other types of social things here in the US. Even the presidential election is causing people to pause on what they want to do. We saw this 4 years ago, and we see it in almost every presidential election. There's a little pause to say, hey, what is my job? What is the economy going to look like? But overall, so long as the zombie apocalypse doesn't actually happen, we should see some really good sales coming as a resurgence from where we are today. As one small side note from the consumer perspective on electric trucks, while that clearly is a better or a more likely solution than personal mobility for fully autonomous trucks, there are still a number of folks out there that aren't interested in anybody having fully autonomous on the vehicle roads. And once we have a fully autonomous semi take out a family of 4 because of a mistake, that's going to put all of that on hold. If we're willing to shut down global economies for COVID, you better believe that we're also going to shut things down if we can't get the programming right on, is it making the correct choice every single time? Mm-hmm. Even if it's safer, psychologically here in the US, it may be rejected because of a salacious, a story that has an emotional impact to it. And with that, I shall go back on mute. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Alexander. Truly appreciate it. I think just to answer Suki's question from my standpoint, and Partha, you might want to jump in on the trucking one. I think there was a volume adjustment of about 14 million. The SAR came down to 14 million just for 2020. And I think the industry company, the OEMs immediately came up with richer incentives and cash on the hood. So if there is a lot of cash on the hood, you know that people just like 0% interest for mortgages. If there's enough cash on the hood, you can come back to the 15, 16, 17 million. Might not be 17. I think this year we in Traction Labs have predicted 13.5 to about 13.8 million, close to that. I know we used some of Alexander's research on that, but I think discounts and financing will be great. Partha, very quickly on the trucking, and then I'll go to the next question, and I'll go to Charles and Raymond on that. So trucking industry, the last mile, do you see any opportunities there if the last mile is solved? So could autonomous trucking be more realistic? And I think Alexander spoke about that a little bit. What are your thoughts on it?
Okay, so fully autonomous trucking is really, like, I want to say, miles away, okay? So that's not in the horizon right now.
Are you sure? Now, Elon says a couple of years away, but that's okay.
Yes, I would have said that in 2013.
Probably Nikola, right? Nikola is coming with a truck, which is going to beat Elon.
Doesn't matter, obviously everybody wants it. There is a lot of tremendous anticipation we are going through more of a reality phase right now. But with respect to the last phase, the last mile phase, I think, I don't think from a 2, 3, 4 years perspective, I don't think autonomous has really a big role to play here. However, and I'll go back to the other, you need to keep in mind, electric actually has a lot of role to play there, okay? So you have to keep that in perspective. So that's going to happen, that could happen sooner. And I'm speaking for myself here, it's not my company's opinion. I've spoken with a lot of companies. There's a company in California called Ford. Now they I think now they call themselves XOS. I've talked to them, talked to a bunch of other companies who are in that same business, and I think same use case business. And for the simple reason, I think various speakers might have alluded to it, electric trucks, electric vehicles in general, they have far less moving parts, much easier to maintain. And all your FedExes and UPSs of the world, typically their mile range is very small. Typically they serve only one small area. Typically they are, I think 60 miles is the maximum range they need, and they can go back to their hub. So it's perfect. Even though battery technology may not give us as much range today in terms of cost, that still might be sufficient for that. So I do see that there are plenty of use cases which will be coming out in the short term. I don't know, short term means could be 3, 4, 5, whatever that be, but not so much autonomous. Okay. However, having said that, for delivery, we do see that delivery might be the first case rather than carrying humans, where you go and press a button and the car takes you. Well, you got to wait for a little bit longer, but delivery is probably going to happen shorter, much quicker, assuming you have, let's say, appropriate structure. If you want to deliver food through sidewalks, well, you better have the appropriate infrastructure to support that. So there are some of those conditions that will impact the evolution.
You guys did you guys correct your volume adjustments for 2020, 2021? Where are you on volumes on OEMs? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I cannot because I don't follow volumes, but this is what I can tell you. We obviously follow a lot. I follow other
Forecast?
trends. Yeah. So I think the bottom line is very clear. It doesn't matter which car company, which supplier. At the end of the day, the COVID-19, where people are staying home and they probably realize they can drive, get by driving less. I think the appetite for buying new car, unless it's a pressing need, probably is going to be a little low. So that's one thing. Second thing is, I don't know if you guys caught that. There are a lot of studies done on the state of the air right after the first few weeks of COVID-19, and all the big cities, starting with New Delhi, Beijing, LA, etc. They all had 10 to up to 40% improvement in air quality, and people are saying, oh my goodness, if that's the case, I probably should be, I might wish to drive a little less. So those are kind of intangible, indirect factors. But I think all in all, and at the fact that their unemployment is such high and it's not going to come back, right away. So I think all in all, industry should be bracing for a much lower number, and don't talk about 70 million units in US. That's not going to happen anytime. I think that's pretty common.
The next one.
Yeah,
the next
I can offer to.
Go ahead, Raymond.
So, just quickly, I think longer term, it will bounce back, as is alluded. Even though in the really longer term, if you look at the prediction, the share mobility actually do cut in a little bit with sort of the regular personal car OEM, revenue. That's given. That's is there. It's not going away. In the short term, also it's actually a double whammy, right? So when people cannot go out of house, you don't have the demand, right? If they go out of house because people stop working, you don't have the supply. So that's if any OEM can escape that unscathed, then at least it will come up very strong in the next.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think consumers' hesitation for shared ride will add to their desire for owning cars for their own right, number one. And this current drop did not happen for a particular structural reason. It's really impacted by one particular cause, which is COVID-19. So again, there are no long-term factors which should be kind of holding the industry back. So I totally agree with Raymond that it's a short term, it should bounce back.
The next question, I'll start with you, Raymond, and this is from an autonomous attendee specifically to Raymond. And I'll just walk through 2 or 3 questions out there. Raymond, perhaps you can just chime in on all of them. Did not see India in your map for innovation centers. Any reason for that? Also, any plans to open one soon? Chennai is an auto hub. You should definitely consider it. So I think you know this very well. GM and Ford already have that. Another question following up on that, is there a Honda Innovation Center in Los Angeles? And the third one is from Samir Rao, which kind of covers this question here. How do you get what's the best way to get a hold of Raymond? Samir, I'll get you his email address after this one, and I'll do an introduction. But Samir is from Innovate, and he has a very good technology. So first 2 questions, Los Angeles, India.
Yes, Los Angeles, though, we try to run a lean and mean organization. So Los Angeles and basically everything on the west side is covered by a couple of people in our team. We have people covering East Coast, we cover our center, and then Canada. So that's how we divided the task. So physically, no, but virtually for sure. And given like this environment, we do realize there's still quite a bit that we can do over virtual means. So the question about India is a very good question. We actually, given our innovation team, every quarter even, or every year, if not quarter, we look at where the opportunity lies, and also where Honda's inspiration in terms of different areas. So actually we do actually have a person in Japan looking at Southeast Asia and including India, and down the road we also will look at places like South America, Africa, right? Those are the interesting area we believe is actually upcoming. So yes, we are looking at those. We haven't really spent the resource to go in there.
Specifically in the two-wheeler industry, right? I think Honda in India is a huge market for the two-wheeler industry. Charles will tell us about that. And Charles, just before you jump in on this, I want to read out a question from Sahu, and perhaps you can give us your thoughts from an India market. For the India market, is the EV motorcycle with battery swapping stations a good opportunity? Me personally, I'm shady about battery swapping, but Go ahead, tell us your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, so I was very skeptical, and I am very skeptical about battery swapping, but I think in the two-wheeler market where we see opportunities, and we've seen some business plans that get there, but almost get there, but not quite. We've been working with some companies because of the higher upfront cost for vehicles with the EV vehicles. It's decreased people's desire sometimes to buy the vehicle, and the delivery companies, the companies that are actually doing e-com, they don't want to own assets, right? They don't want them on their balance sheet. But where we've seen opportunities is if you're on the road a lot and you could sell to fleets of drivers who service Flipkart and Amazon during the day and Swiggy and Zomato at night, and you sell the vehicle up front without the battery, then you could bring the cost of the vehicle down below an ICE vehicle. And then you'd have battery as a service as basically being your fuel cost. And you put that battery as a service because back to what Partha was saying, everything's kind of very tight radius, and especially in India, you've got a hub. You kind of serve a radius from a hub. You go out and you do deliveries, you come back. You go out and do deliveries and you come back. And there's no range anxiety in these logistics spaces, especially in India. You're talking about a 5-kilometer radius, and you're not out for, if you fill a truck, a three-wheeler, then we're out for 60, 80, 100 kilometers in a day, and we can do that with one charge. But with a motorcycle, it's a much shorter range, and we think battery as a service could be a really interesting opportunity. The questions are around ownership and treatment of the asset, and are we willing to underwrite the battery if the person who's using the battery isn't the owner of the battery? And that's really where, because the battery is what's really valuable down the road, it's not the chassis. And so that's where we've been having some issues. But if we could have a company that said, here's 1,000 drivers for Flipkart and Amazon, and you could put 1,000, you could start to swap them out. The other thing with swapping is, since the battery is the most expensive component, if you now have 2 batteries per vehicle, you've just increased the cost of the battery, the cost of the vehicle overall. But when you're swapping and you're doing a lot of swapping with numbers of vehicles, then you can bring it down to 1.5, 1.3 batteries per asset, depending on your charging and utilization rate. So I think it's an interesting opportunity. We hope to see it. Outside of the fleet utilization, we've seen ideas and we haven't found any of the storylines compelling.
We tried, so I used to work for a company called US Electrica, just as an FYI. We tried battery swapping in the United States market, and it was very difficult. And then I think Nissan tried it out very seriously for the US market, and they failed. But I think very interestingly, and Raymond, you might have some insights on this, China is doing amazing stuff in battery swapping. No, China is doing everything, okay? So I have to be a little skeptical, but I think safety is a huge issue in the swapping technology. It's not all that easy to swap. Battery maintenance is a huge issue. But tell us what's happening in China from a battery swap standpoint, because that's an interesting opportunity.
Yeah, I was just as skeptical as Charles before, but in the recent years, we were looking at a company in China. I think it's called InMotor, right? So they actually had a very interesting business model. So they are working with OEMs to build and do the interface with the battery. So they run the swapping station, right, and collecting data, how people use, where they go. So there's a lot of access to be had there, extra value. But what's interesting is their business model. They're exploring different things. One of the things they're exploring is kind of put this battery charging station and spin up ownership, like a store, to lease, using leasing model for motorcycles. So imagine if I am a delivery person, that's actually where the customer set is mostly, is the delivery goods in China. Before, people have to own a motorcycle and have to own the battery, and you go and swap. But now what they do is do a leasing model. So I don't need to pay upfront fee. I just pay a certain amount of fees every month, and then I just basically compare that, and that including battery swap, including the leasing of the motorcycle, and just compare that with how much money I make.
0, 2, 2, 6, 7, 0, 0, 9
I
is not available.
Oops, somebody is.
The mailbox is full and cannot accept any messages at this time.
I think, Raymond, you made a phone call there by mistake. So somebody made a phone call. Sorry about that. We lost the last part of you. We lost the last part of that conversation. But just to close that out, I think it's the subscription model is very, very interesting, Raymond, if that is what.
That's right.
I think now if you see this ecosystem working out, just to triangulate what we are talking about, in America, there were certain barriers. The infrastructure is in a particular state, right? China is now leading the technology part of it. Now, if you take a look at the India solution where it is short mileage, China is long mileage, by the way. I mean, it's a mix of long and short. I think taking this idea of subscription, taking this idea of BS6 changes towards the electrification, and the challenges in India, by the way, you're not going to get a plug point at every apartment, right? You have to get these plugs from your house or something like that, right? So I think it's an interesting, putting these things together, it's an interesting space from an innovation standpoint, while OEMs and researchers and we with consistent OEM background come up with thoughts about risks in it. I think there is a huge opportunity for innovators. Take the risk, put it in a different environment, American environment. I think swapping Nissan tried it out and really lost their backs on it, right? So I think in emerging markets, it's an interesting opportunity whether you do the subscription or the swap. Let me go through some other questions out here, guys. Sorry, I had to jump in on that. Dhaval Kapadia, my friend, has a question. To Charles, are there any lessons we in Western economies can learn from India on increasing utilization of our mobility infrastructure based on electric vehicles having higher upfront costs and lower operating costs? I think you just spoke about this a little bit, but elaborate on that. And I'm sure
briefly, because you know, other people touched on it a little bit. I mean, I think that the difference in infrastructure in India and China, as Raymond was talking about, is very different than what you see in the US. It's much more densely packed. It's a closer radius. And in the US, the focus has been on passenger cars. That's where the you know, OE production can be, and you can have individual charging stations set up in houses. You know, my guess is that the UPSs of the world and everyone else, because they you know, they explore natural gas and other alternatives to decrease their cost. But the battery cost of a big van, like a UPS delivery van, compared to a 3-wheeler or 2-wheeler is dramatically different. I mean, the number of cells that you have to have in space in a UPS van to push that van, and it's also you know, those are open air, they're not cooled. So now you've got different thermal management problems, both warming them in cold environments and heating them. You know, those are controlled by your HVAC system in a Tesla or in a Prius or in a Volt. You know, those are all controlled by HVAC, and you don't have that in an open air environment. So I think the problem in the US is more of the scale. It's, you don't have these little 2-wheelers, except for outside of kind of small city, like not small city, but dense cities, like in New York, where you have 2-wheel delivery and maybe even bicycle delivery. But if you live in Atlanta like I do, I mean, it's a you know, 6 million people, but over a huge radius. And so you've got these vans that do small deliveries, but they're stationed way outside. And then they all drive in, and then they do their deliveries in a small radius, and then they all drive way back out to that infrastructure point. And so the utilization rate is just dramatically different in the US environment. I'd hope to see it. I'd love to see it, but I think that just the cost process of putting something in a UPS van versus a 2-wheeler or 3-wheeler is just dramatically different. And that's where I think hydrogen. Yeah, I mean, listen, if the utilization rate makes sense, these guys are looking at innovative technologies, and they'll come up with, they'll start to adopt solutions. And I think you know, back to Partha's initial conversation of you know, the 100 kilowatt per hour and the $100 per kilowatt hour, excuse me.
Right. I think just to add to the Dhaval's point, I think India should have, by the way, taken hydrogen and fuel cell rather than the electric route. But hey, we are down the electric route, so it's going to be interesting. I have a couple of questions from Abhishek Narang, and I'll just read a couple of them up, and probably you guys can jump in. I will jump in on one of them. But I think Gatik is an interesting company in last mile autonomous space. And he says, what about Waymo? I think one of the hidden gems in the automotive industry is Waymo. It's run by my ex-boss, who is one of the most brilliant people in the automotive industry, John Krafchek. So I'm all hands on Waymo. So 2 questions there. I think Gatik. So your thoughts on Gatik and Waymo. Who wants to jump on that? Who knows Gatik? Do you know Gatik? I have not heard about Gatik. So Abhishek, if you can refresh that question. Anybody has thoughts on way more than just one way, just technology? Waymo. Any thoughts on Waymo?
Yeah, I think, I know of Gatik. I don't know too much about it, but I think Waymo is, of course, if you're better over the 500-pound gorilla at this point.
with a CEO who's a bigger 1,000-pound gorilla.
Yeah, so I think it's a different market segment in most than I think a lot of OEMs.
Are you guys introducing Waymo in any of your minivans or anything in Honda? Has Honda signed up as a? I know Chrysler does.
No,
right? Chrysler has an arrangement.
So Chrysler did, and some like
Land Rover.
But we haven't. Yeah, we actually have some engagement. They have a different business model that doesn't quite match what we do.
Honda and GM are partners, by the way.
Honda and GM are partners on autonomy.
Autonomy, electrification, hydrogen, all of them.
Which one? You guys are Argo, or which one is yours? Which one is your autonomous platform?
One, right? Is that what it is? So GM1 or something?
Same thing,
right? Is that what they call?
Yeah.
It's
Honda is
it's a different.
With Cruise.
Right. By the way, you guys are coming out. When is the Cruise without the steering wheel coming up, man? With the center steering wheel. After that.
Yeah, just look for a news announcement.
Yeah, exactly. Look for a news announcement on that, right? No steering wheel. Autonomous.
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't know you guys were partners.
Waymo, I think it's definitely it's a formidable force at the robotaxi type of things, for sure. With their talent, with their technology. The problem there, of course, is really, how do you get massive production and cost down? And of course, you have this issue with the psychology of, particularly with this COVID, people were kind of rethink about sharing, seats and door handles with other people. So you have to remain to see.
Yeah, and I think it's a tremendous. Partha, did you have any thoughts on autonomy before I ask a couple of other questions out here?
Ravi, we are already, 17 minutes over the
Way
event.
over. That's right. Sorry about that.
Please.
We have to cut this down, huh? So we have producers who are. Listen, absolutely. Anil and Anshuman, thank you very much for your support. Partho, so I will actually close this down. We are way over, and I think we have kept all our guests way over time. So special thanks to Charles, Raymond, Alexander, and Partha for amazing insights. This is something passionate to all of our hearts. We have more questions here. We will forward them to you. Hopefully you can give us your thoughts, and we will send it out to the people who sent it. Sahu has a whole bunch of questions. Sorry, I could not get to them, but we will send this out to everybody. Okay. That said, thank you. Making automotive.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I appreciate it.
Ravi, here's the thing, and to all the panelists, this event has been great. We had great attendance, and people have been asking questions. Why don't we also figure something out for sometime in July, one more event on autonomous vehicle with the same panel if they're available, and take it from where we are leaving today. That way, we can answer questions of our attendees as well as talk about some new points.
Yeah, there are some, absolutely. Perhaps break up ACEs or case in the case of General Motors into each of those segments. And there's so much around mobility, right? This is such a fun industry to be in. Charles is, all your perspectives globally are so impressive. So absolutely, we are looking forward to having you guys back. You guys have been fun. Thank you very, 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 very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Ravi.
Thank you.
For the opportunity.
Thanks for the invite, Ravi.
Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.